Excellent. Excellent. Is out for delivery. All right, so here we have the Teeling single malt Irish whiskey, which I don't think is discontinued, but I don't know if they make it the same anymore. Teeling is a distillery that started up not that long ago, but it's also an old distillery, so it's kind of weird. It's like it's a distillery used to exist a while ago, and then got bought, and then the guy's like son started up a new distillery. So I don't know that any of the Teeling that's in here is actually distilled by Teeling. I think it's all sourced. And likewise, this particular bottle probably doesn't come about again, because it's all sourced. I think ideally Teeling is going to produce their own stuff. They're just not there quite yet. So again, we're gonna do a quick, well, maybe not quick, but we'll do a review of this guy here. So I'll give it, why is this not blank? Why is my blank sheet not blank? That's not right. It's not right at all. I got fucked up. I gotta do extra work because I done goofed. Goofed something. All right. So yeah, so here we are, the Teeling single malt Irish whiskey. It is independently owned, and I'm pretty sure this is sourced from Cooley, but that's later in the notes. So this is 46 ABV, 92 proof. It is non-chill filtered. It might be natural color. I'm not sure. So I couldn't find for sure if it's natural color, and there's some suspect things going on with the bottle that make me think it's not natural color. So you and I both know that unless they write natural color on the label, a lot of times it's colored. And you and I both know that sometimes we like to write things that are really similar to the words natural color without saying the words natural color. And we don't really like that, but it is non-chill filtered. This we know. The reason that it's suspect is because I cannot find anything that says it's natural color, and I feels really, see this thing right here. This makes me assume that it's actually colored because it says here natural character. That's really, if you're not paying attention, maybe looks like it's natural color. Here it says non-chill filter, and here it says natural character. Really not clear, really feels bad. So I don't know. It's not very dark, but it doesn't say natural color. It says natural character, and I can't find a place where it's confirmed anywhere. So I think it's colored, unfortunately. But we'll let you make the best judge. Just give an age statement, no age statement. That being said, it does say it was bottled in 2018. So this is quite an old bottle. I did not buy it in 2018, but it says bottled in 2018. So this is definitely not representative of, if you get a Teeling product today, it's not going to look or taste like, well, it might look like this. I think the bottle still looks like this, but it might not be this exact kind of thing. I think they changed the wine casks in here too. Minimum 3 years. What's the rule for Irish whiskey? Minimum age Irish whiskey. So for it to be called Scotch, it would be 3 years. To be called Irish whiskey, minimum 3 years. So minimum 3 years. to be called Irish whiskey. Single malt just means single distillery, all malted barley. So it is single distillery, all malted barley, and it is at least 3 years old, but there's no age statement. And judging by what it says in my notes, I couldn't really find one either. So I don't know how old it is exactly. Now, it does say natural character. I think it's colored probably, even if I'll let you be the judge. But it's not terribly dark. But that being said, it's probably not terribly old. There's a good amount left. So you can be the judge. It looks kind of colored to me, but I don't know. That being said, this is ex-bourbon, so it is ex-bourbon matured, but it is finished in 5 different wine barrels. So they have it aged in ex-bourbon for an undetermined amount of time, at least 3 years. And then it is finished in sherry, port, Madeira, white Burgundy, and Cabernet Sauvignon. So that ex-bourbon is put into one of those 5 barrels and then was then blended together to create the end product. So it is a lot of wine going on here. There's every wine, all the wines finished here. So it's still 46% alcohol, so we like that. It's non-chill filtered, we like that. General glass presence, viscosity seems pretty good. So this Teeling family here, this guy John Teeling, he bought a state-owned potato alcohol distillery in 1985 and converted it into a whiskey distillery. And that would eventually become the Cooley distillery. So that's the distillery that produces like Connemara, Tyrconnell. And Cooley was eventually purchased by Beam Suntory, which is now Suntory Global Spirits. And then his sons, Jack and Stephen, founded a new Teeling distillery in 2015. So that's the one that this brand is from. That being said, it's not the original one. The original one is Cooley, but this liquid is sourced, because if they just make a distillery, obviously they don't have any liquid yet. It's sourced from Cooley. So it's kind of like Teeling's liquid, because it used to be called the Teeling Distillery before it was the Cooley Distillery. So it is kind of like it's Teeling liquid, but it's sourced from Cooley officially. It just used to be called the Teeling Distillery, but it's different than the new Teeling Distillery. And this is a rare thing these days, because you don't get too many Irish distilleries opening in Dublin. As far as I understand, this Teeling Distillery is the first Irish distillery to open in Dublin in 100 years. So it doesn't happen too much anymore. But trying to make sure that we're as I'm as stable a state as possible, because I still haven't actually finished this Red Bull, and we're kind of trying to not let that impact our judgment here. So we're going to give it a score out of 100. 25 on aroma, 25 on palate, 25 on finish, 10 on texture, and 15 for our overall experience. How we feel about our experience with this. And as always, we will post our notes in the Discord server with a highlight of this live review. And I also started a little bit of like a ranking section, and so that if you're in the Discord and go into the review section, there is like a rankings of all the reviews that I've done by value and by overall score. Unfortunately, the reality is though that they only let you pin one thing on Discord forums, which is sad. So I can't actually pin them, but the links to those ranking threads are in the pinned thread. So at least you can find them that way, at least. All right, so if we make some predictions easily, it's probably going to have some kind of like orchard fruit character, some kind of like malty character, biscuity maybe. That being said, Cooley Distillery, just so we're clear, is all double distilled. So typically in Irish whiskey, it's triple distilled. But I think everything that comes out of Cooley is actually only double distilled. I don't think it says that here exactly, but um, I think Cooley only double distills whiskey. There's only two stills there. So um, this is not going to have the same kind of Irish triple distilled character that you might expect. And there's probably going to be plenty of wininess, kind of wine impact going on. Yeah, right out the gate, there's like a bit of a maltiness, but you also get like a white grape, white wine sort of note. It's definitely a little bit winey. You still get some of that distillate orchard fruit kind of character. There's a little bit of vanilla in there, but probably like the biggest notes right away are like a malt grain character, a wine, white wine, mostly white wine. I would say it's white wine character, um, and a little bit of like light orchard fruit with like an accenting like vanilla. Now the malt is not as biscuity, um, or like as shortbready as a lot of times you get out of Irish whiskey. And I'm starting to learn, and maybe not anecdotally, it feels like that kind of shortbread malt note is a result of the triple distillation. But I can't be sure. It just seems like these ones that are Irish that are not triple distilled don't exhibit necessarily the same malty shortbread kind of character. It's coming across more Scotch like. Um, but man, that white wine casking is driving for sure. And when I look at the barrels here though, they're not really white wine barrels. So I get the feeling that that wine presence is kind of like fusing with some of that malt, kind of orchard fruit character, and kind of feeling like making it feel like that wine note is lighter and brighter than what you would get out of a sherry port Madeira, kind of casking. Like there might be like a bit of a raisiny kind of dried fruit character to it, but it's not what appears to me right away. It's kind of like after searching for it. All right, let me try this on the palate. Sláinte. mean, it's a lot sweeter on the palate than you get at the nose, but it's kind of like similar to the nose. It's that dried, not dried. It's like a little bit of that cereal grain malty character with those wine notes, but there is actually like a thread of sweetness through it, and you do get some like maybe like dried red fruits on the palate, and the finish is like a little bit spicy, a little bit um, unsweetened chocolate. The lingering part is the sweet malt. Interesting. One more year and I can't drink it legally. You mean one more year and you can drink it legally? Um, yeah, I think I don't know. Um, I don't know what kind of influences you have in your life, but I definitely like. I didn't start consuming alcohol until I was in like my late 20s. Um, so for me, it's all about flavor. It's not about like getting buzzed or anything like that. It's like it's entirely flavor related. Um, so if you approach it from the perspective of like, flavor rather than the perspective of alcohol, you probably will maybe avoid some bad headaches in the future. Just a word of advice. It's easy to get carried away, as I'm sure you know. Most people have a time or two where they get carried away, but just approach it with like a healthy mindset, everything in moderation. Not that you can't have a good time, but oh, it's so like it's like that sweet malty character and that like wine character are really close together and are both like kind of in the driver's seat. There's a little bit of a vanilla accent, but you fucker. But I can't like pick out any of the individual like wine influences. It's kind of just like a grouped wine character. Um, Grouped wine character and like a sweet vanilla malt sort of character in it too. That's like the main driving force. I got one fucker. It's always one. But the overall, the nose is not that complex. You might think with so many different wine finishes involved, you might get a whole bunch of different things, but really, I just assume that there's probably just too many wine barrels. So each one is so like low presence that they can't all be heard. They kind of just get heard in like a mess of, hey, there's wine involved here. You do get some of that dried fruit character that normally you would associate um, with sherry casking, and we don't actually know the distribution of the five different wine casks that it's finished in. So it could be there's a higher distribution of sherry in here, but that's probably like I don't know for sure, but that might be the most common one, most common barrel. And the sweetness is kind of really like an accent. It's like really close together and tied with the malty note. Yeah, that unsweetened dark chocolate, a little bit of spice on the finish, a little bit of oakiness. That like sweet malt character lingers. The wine barrels are present, but not that loud on the finish. It's almost all nose, mid palate for the wine finishes, except for like some amount of dried fruit character on the finish is undoubtedly wine barrel related. That's kind of interesting. There's just like a sweet malty note is like present throughout the whole experience. Um, it's definitely the sweet malt and the kind of conglomerate of wines. Um, they're just too much of a like cacophony to really, I think, be heard very well separately. So let's take a minute here and try to give a score out of 25 on the nose, which frankly is not unpleasant. I do like it. This is definitely like a little unique in nosing, um, because it is so wine forward. There's a lot of wine involved, um, but there's not like a huge amount of individual notes going on here. Um, some of them are pretty buried. So if we recap this nose, maybe some light orchard fruit character. That sweetness and malt are tied together. You get a wine note, which to me comes across more like white wine, but it's a winey character to it. And you get some amount of like dried fruit, um, dried red fruit kind of note, like sort of raisiny, but not quite. I wouldn't call it raisin or date, but it is a dried fruit note that feels red, if that makes any sense. And there's a little bit of vanilla influence kind of all around. I'm gonna call this one. It's got like several notes, but they're varying in intensity. It's not it's not wholly complicated. There's not like random hits of random notes, interesting things peeking their head in at all, or anything like that. So we're gonna call this call it 15. 15 out of 25. So we're gonna focus on the palate. Sounds like it tastes all right. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would drink anything that actively tasted bad. And some people experience with like drinking a neat alcohol is like, oh man, tastes like burning. It's awful. There's some amount of like tuning that's required to your palate to like acclimate to alcohol, especially at different levels of alcohol, and to like also um, tune in certain flavor experiences to like be able to like verbally like even recognize that what you're tasting. It takes a little bit of practice for sure. But there's also like degrees of the quality of the drink, right? So I don't really tend to drink anything from the bottom shelf. Um, I'm not doing like J&B or or Bell's or something, some kind of scotch from the bottom shelf, or like Jameson regular, stuff like that. I don't really do that too much. Fancy pants, yeah. That being said, I feel like I will eventually do some kind of like, maybe it'll be a bit of a meme, but we might get a bunch of like real cheap scotches and stuff and just like see how bad they are. But um, I don't tend to frequent the bottom shelf very much. So when you hit a certain price to quality ratio, the stuff doesn't really like come across as burny and nasty and harsh and spiky because those things have been rounded out of it. They're more balanced. They have more age. Um, they're more selective. So um, when you get to that tier, once you reach a certain quality level, then man, I sure hope it tastes good because otherwise you're paying a lot of money for nothing. This bottle, I think, I can't remember what price I paid for it. It was a while ago, but actually, I can probably look through here. But I get the feeling this was like around $100. 8 and 15. This says 120. So um, just to give you an idea. And that's Canadian dollars too from a government liquor store. So put that in perspective, I suppose. So we're going to try the palate here and we're going to try to analyze as much as possible. It's mostly coming across similar to the nose in most respects. So immediately on the arrival, you get some of that sweet malty character, actually a little bit of baking spice on the palate. And that sweet malt and baking spice kind of ride through. In the mid palate, you start to arrive with some of those wine notes, some of that white wine kind of character, along with some dried red fruits. It's pretty reasonable. Has a good bit of a transition in there. Kind of from between the arrival and the mid palate, you kind of get a little bit of a switch from that like sweet malty note into like those wine related notes. That's something that's really common actually that I've experienced personally is like a lot of times when you get that have something that is wine cask finished, they start to really show up on the mid palate. It's like the place to find them. They seem to always be like in the mid palate after the arrival before you swallow. Um, that being said, it's not blowing me away. It's not truly outrageous. It's good. We like it. It's some good flavors. It's good. Not a whole lot of things going on. Not much different than the nose. It's not like a huge departure or a huge development. It's probably gonna be really similar kind of score. You know what? I like 15 here too. I'll call it 15 on the palate. All right, so now we're gonna focus on the finish. Um, So as soon as you swallow, you get some of those baking spices, accompanied by that like sweet malty note. Unsweetened chocolate is in there. A little bit of barrel oak character, and maybe like a slight whispery amount of those dried fruits. What lingers is kind of like that sweet malty note and kind of like the oakiness of it. That's kind of what's lingering right now. Um, Length is actually pretty good. Call length like medium plus, pretty good length of finish. Um, Being said, there's not very many strong notes. It's very like it's very tame. Finish is very tame. This is kind of coming across pretty all rounder kind of type. It's like there's a pretty good aroma, there's a pretty good palate, there's a pretty good finish, but nothing's blowing me away here. Um, the intensity of the flavors is good enough to not be disappointed, but it's not bursting or anything like that. Um, I like 15 for the finish too. It's just straight up 15s all across the board. Now we're going to talk about the texture, um, and it doesn't have that extra silky smooth character you get from a triple distilled spirit, because it is in fact not triple distilled. Um, that being said, it is not super watery thin, but not super terribly thick. And it's feeling like a 5 out of 10. It doesn't come across like heavily viscous or oily or particularly robust, but it's not watery either. Yeah, I'm gonna call this a 5. Now we're gonna think about how has our experience been with this particular whiskey. Does it stand out against its peers? Is it doing anything interesting, anything unique? How much are we enjoying it? My most subjective category. I like what they tried to do with all these wine casks, but I feel like it's just maybe too many. It's too much. Each particular cask is so diluted against each other that it's not possible really to really pick out all the individual casks going on here. It just feels like a conglomeration of wine, maybe mostly sherry. Um, you do get plenty of wine character. It is definitely in the driving seat. Um, and there's definitely some dried fruit kind of things going on, which are wine related. But um, I would love if they had like instead of 5 casks, they had like 3 or something like that. Like just cut down the number of individual finishes on here, and maybe that way, like the ones that you have left over are more pronounced and more detectable. I can't really put my finger on any one of these individual casks other than probably the sherry one, but it could be the port and the Madeira and the Cabernet Sauvignon are like rolled into that sherry note. Um, but I feel like they're just they're just melded all together. They're not really speaking individually, which is kind of unfortunate. You'd like to get some additional complexity out of using so many different kinds of barrels to finish. That being said, it's good. It's not like it's bad. Um, Definitely doing a unique thing. It doesn't come across similar to other Irish whiskeys, but there's nothing wowing me about it. There's nothing really drawing me to this particular dram. It's not like, oh man, this is a real wine bomb or anything like that. There is a wine note, but it's not presenting so strong that it would be like standing out against other whiskeys that have a wine character to them. Like I'd almost say that the winey kind of character out of the cognac barrels in the writer's tiers is more pronounced, um, and more interesting than the wine casking going on here. And despite the fact that cognac isn't even wine, it's just grapey. Um, so it's distinct. It's not bad, but it's not standing out to me. But it's better than forgettable. So we'll call this call this a 6 out of 15. All right, so this is 30, 45, 50, 56, 56. We're gonna rate this one 56 out of 100. This is what we call a good whiskey. This is a good whiskey. It's not bad. It's not a bad whiskey. I enjoyed it. That being said, it's not wowing me. It's not doing anything too crazy. And you would expect maybe to get something crazy out of all these wine casks, but it hasn't really translated um, exactly. So pretty good, not bad.